guys, so it's been a minute since I've been on this channel, but hopefully it was worth the wait because we got a cool video today. I've been working on this, well, maybe not working on it, but I've had this idea for a video for a long time because I get a lot of questions all the time. What movies do you recommend if we're just getting started in horror, or we're new to the, genre, we want to get into it, but we're too scared, things like that. Which I think there's two factors to this question. There's the people who want to know the classics and what to watch. If they're getting into the genre, they want to watch, like, the movies that are known to be famous in the horror genre, things like that. And then there are those who want to know what to watch that's horror but not that scary. This video is the second part to that. If you want the other part where I list what I believe to be the classics in horror that you probably shouldn't skip as a horror fan, I can do that video as well, because there are other lists out there, but I feel like it's not always objective, these kind of lists. I think it's a lot of personal opinion thrown in there. And I did a lot of research while creating this video, and some of the lists, people were recommending movies that were weird recommendations to me. I tried to pick movies. First of all, this video is super hard to do because different things scare different people. For instance, home invasion films don't freak me out, but I know people where it gives them so much anxiety they can't even watch them. So it's hard cultivating a list of movies that I find aren't that scary, but also aren't super, super weak. I feel like some people put Coraline and The Nightmare Before Christmas on their horror movie for newbies lists. We're not going that weak, we're doing horror. They're horror films, some arguably probably more thriller, but they're a good stepping stone into the genre if you're new and you want to get into it, but you don't want to be terrified and scared to go to sleep at night. So I tried to pick a couple different types of genres, try to cover a lot of spectrum here of the horror genre, because there's a lot of sub-genres in there and some things scare different people. So I tried to cover as much as I could. Granted, if you have any suggestions, feel free to leave your movie recommendations for newbies down below, but let's get started. I have 12 movies. I don't know why there's 12. I couldn't stop at 10 and I didn't find 20, so we're doing 12. The first one I'm going to recommend is Creep. This movie, Creep 2, just came out also, by the way. I did watch it. I will be reviewing it. So I recommend Creep and Creep 2 for that matter, because the vibes of it are eerie, but it's not blatant horror. The only thing that I would say to be wary of in these movies are jump scares, but they're corny, silly jump scares that aren't really horror. They do them in a way that's like obnoxious, but it's not like, ooh, I'm so scared right now. So that's the only thing that could possibly freak you out in the movie, but honestly, there's low gore, there's like barely anything. It's pretty low budget, so I feel like that's a reason why it's low gore, and it's found footage style, self-filmed kind of movies. So that also kind of takes, I don't know, sometimes it's scarier that way, and sometimes the budget's lower and it makes it less scary. But I think the Creep movies are pretty good for newbies because there's not a lot going on, there's not a lot of scariness, it's just kind of eerie and creepy, obviously based on the name. And that subgenre would be like reality. I consider that like a realistic type movie, where it's, kind of a killer-esque film, so, it could happen in real life. That's kind of what I consider to be realistic movies, is if it could actually happen. The next one's The Invitation. It's kind of in the same subgenre, it's kind of culty, but it's also more of a subtle film. There aren't too many, like, horror elements, like true horror elements. I do want to point out, some people would argue that The Ring and movies like Mama would be good for newbies, and granted, as much as I love those movies, they're in my top 5 films. I don't recommend them for newbies because they did scare me so bad. So to me, this is my personal list, and I take into consideration if I was personally creeped out, because I still get scared. Like, I like horror, I am desensitized to a lot of things, but I still do get scared by certain horror elements, supernatural being one of them, scary women being one of them. I don't know what it is about creepy women, gets me every time. Also, the rating system, don't necessarily trust that, because it tells you what it's rated R for or rated PG-13 for, and I think some would also argue that PG-13 movies are a good way to go for newbies, but I don't think that's always the case. Next we have Carrie, the original, and I'd say the remake, even though the remake is a lot worse, I think, than the original. I like the original. I feel like it is a classic. Also, it would be on the list of films not to miss if you want to get into the horror genre, because it is such a classic. And of course I'm biased because it's Stephen King's first published book and turned into a movie, and I really, really like it. But that is more of the supernatural subgenre, but it's not so scary that it's gonna creep you out too much and you can't sleep, because it's more of like a targeted subject, I don't even know, story. You know, Carrie's not gonna come after you, for instance. You don't feel like she's going to kill you because you know who she's targeting. So that kind of separation helps for newcomers into the genre. Also, the date, it was made in the 1970s, and I recommend, if that is something that you feel disconnected with, is older films, so you can start there. Although to me, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original, still gets me to this day and is still scary. One of my favorite movies of all time, and I believe to be a really good film to start with if you are new, is The Blair Witch Project. This one's kind of a controversial film because a lot of people hate it and a lot of people love it. I love it for the element that it is like the first of its kind. It really paved the way for found footage horror to create its own genre, and I mean, it's inspired so many movies beyond it, and I feel like it has a lot of power in that way, and so I treat it like a classic also, so it would be on that other list. But also it's a good one because you don't really see too much. The newer one though, however, you do, and that one is really scary. The last like 20 minutes of that movie really freaked me out. But the original found footage is amazing, and it's really subtle and it's more conceptual, so you don't really see too many horror elements. It's just in your mind, you're thinking like, this is really creepy and weird. And that would be kind of in the supernatural slash realistic genre. Obviously it wouldn't happen in real life, but it could, I guess. I don't know. Okay, the next I have a few different movies within this kind of genre. Your Next is the next movie that I would recommend, because I feel like black comedies are also a really good way to start into the horror genre, because you have the horror elements and sometimes they're really good and sometimes really scary, but then you have the jokes to kind of cut through that tension so it doesn't feel so heavy of a movie, if that makes sense. So Your Next is a couple different subgenres. It's a realistic one, it could actually happen. It's a home invasion one, which goes hand in hand with the realistic type genre, because obviously home invasions could actually happen. But mostly it's a black comedy, which is why it's on this list. I feel like this is a good one if you're scared of home invasion movies, but you want to be a little bit scared. Watch Your Next if you're new, because like I said, the black comedy part of it, the jokes and stuff are actually, it's really funny actually. I am really picky with my dark comedies because the jokes usually are really, really cheesy, but I did find that Your Next was actually genuinely funny, and it had horror elements and, you know, cool like twists and turns and things like that, so I really recommend this movie. The next one is, you know, what I would argue not necessarily a straight horror, but to me, it's kind of horrifying, and that is Signs. I think Signs is kind of a weird one to put on this list, to be honest, because I don't know, I feel like not a lot of people would recommend it as a horror movie. It is, of course, the alien genre. To me, alien genre can be super, super terrifying because aliens are scary. Like, let's be real. It could be real too. It could be realistic. I'm not going to put it in that category, but I think it's really cool to think about as a realistic type movie. Obviously with Signs, as the movie progresses, to me it gets a little less scary once you start visually seeing things, but as far as like the mystery in the beginning, I think that is what's really creepy, but it's also more of a subtle film. There's not too many horror elements, which is why some people would argue it's not a horror movie at all. But I think if you want to watch like a suspenseful alien type film that might creep you out, that, you know, Signs would be a good option. The next one is 100% amazing for newbies and highly, highly recommend. It is The Others. This is one of my favorite movies actually. I've seen it so many times. I love this movie for the subtleties in it, the twists, the acting is amazing. It stars Nicole Kidman. I just think this is really, really good. It is a supernatural subgenre. It is a supernatural subgenre, which I feel like I didn't put too many on this list that are like ghosty, but this one is kind of a ghosty supernatural film, which usually are the scariest to me. And this movie is kind of scary, but I feel like the scares are subtle enough and not too like jumpy, that you could handle it if you were new to the genre. The next one, we have A Tale of Two Sisters / The Uninvited. A Tale of Two Sisters is a Japanese film first and foremost, and then it was remade in an American version called The Uninvited. This would be like a realistic type supernatural type movie. It's a very weird movie, and I don't want to like give anything away, but it's really, really good. The storyline's really cool, and I think the storyline is what makes it good for newbies, because it is it's another one of those like Carrie things. It's such a specific storyline that you know it's not gonna happen to you, it's not gonna come for you, that kind of thing. So I feel like it's easy to separate yourself from this movie. Another black comedy I have to recommend is Tucker and Dale vs. Evil. This was on my top favorite movies list for so long, for good reason. I love this movie. It's funny, it's gory, so if gore is something that bothers you, this might get to you, but it's gory in a funny way. Like the gore plays into the jokes a lot of the time, and it is funny. So I feel like, you know, if you want to be grossed out but also like creeped out but also laughing, this is a good movie for that. And it is in the reality category, the realistic, could actually happen, not really, but you know. The next movie I would recommend is The Thing, the original, and then the newer version that came out. Love them because they're not, to me they're scary. That's an alien film, obviously, but to me it's like more of an action movie than a horror movie. There's definitely creepy moments. The alien's really scary looking, especially in the original. They don't use CG, it's real effects, so in that way it's really amazing visually. But in general, I don't think it's that scary. So, and I feel like a lot of alien movies aren't that scary, except if you really want to challenge yourself. One that would be, I would consider more advanced horror movies, would be The Fourth Kind. That's my favorite alien movie of all time because it is so horrifying. So it's definitely not in the same realm as that. The Thing is more action plot based than it is horror based, but the horror in it is really good and not that scary. And lastly, I had to add this to the list, even though there are scary elements in it that did scare me a lot, and that is Cabin in the Woods. I feel like this is a really good movie to start with also because it makes fun of the horror genre as a whole, which I think is funny, although you might not get it if you haven't really been watching horror movies your whole life or been watching the classics. They do make fun of it. The first like 30 minutes you're gonna be like, why am I watching this? What am I watching? And then you get it, and then it's funny. But if you are new, you might not get the references as much, but I still think it's a really entertaining movie. It has a lot of twists towards the end that are really good, but also there are moments in it that really did terrify me. I'm not gonna say which scenes, but you know, there's some scary elements in it. So I feel like not a lot of people would be scared about this movie. I'm kind of weird in what scares me, but I feel like it's in a good way, and it's not too bad where it's like the whole movie is like this. There's only certain parts that are like a little bit, you know, scary. But also it's a black comedy, so you have the jokes in there, and that also helps to make it not as scary, especially as a whole. So that's my list of horror movies for newbies. Let me know if you have any other recommendations. Obviously there's probably a million out there that I just couldn't think of, but leave your list down below, and if you disagree with any on my list, if you think they're too easy or too advanced for newbies, leave your opinions down below. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.